Moving on, though, Keir Starmer's election dreams have been slain further by the Labour ceasefire mutiny, while Osama bin Laden's letter to America justifying September 11 terror attacks gained sympathy on TikTok. What the hell is going on? Joining me to discuss all of this and more is my panel for tonight. We've got Steve Edginton from The Telegraph. Welcome. Writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth and Director of Communications from the Henry Jackson Society, Megan Gittos. Welcome to all three of you. We've got the front pages to look at later on, but before we do anything else, I want to talk to you first about the World of Woke story that I did. Kim Kardashian winning GQ's Man of the Year, or at least being purporting to be on the cover of GQ magazine. Are you feeling put upon, Stephen?
I suppose I feel a bit upset about it. I don't really read GQ too much,
no.
to be honest. But they could have chosen a man. It could have been nice.
It's Man of the Year. Imagine if you made some man the Woman of the Year. It wouldn't happen with Candice, would it?
Yeah, it happens with some things. What's his name?
What was that? Dylan Mulvaney. He won Woman of the Year for something, didn't he?
You have to balance it out.
Yeah.
Really. And she was, dressed in that strange outfit as well, looking quite butch and very un-Kim Kardashian.
Yes.
Just clearly a publicity stunt.
Yes. I guess everybody, even GQ, needs publicity at some point or other. Do you care at all?
It's got everyone talking, hasn't it? So it does seem like it's
Yeah.
worked. But, yeah, I guess it's one of those things. She will always create a story, whatever she does.
She
so,
will.
Yeah.
I worry now, though, that some of this wokery is just being kind of continued because it does get publicity, because, people like us talk about it. And so, we're perpetuating it by giving them, attention whenever they want it. A bit like the big story this week, the endometriosis story, where they appointed a trans woman to run a charity for an illness that basically only afflicts women.
I know. That interview, though, that Emma Barnett did was really, really, really
She was
good.
great, yeah.
She is, she's excellent.
I defended the BBC for the first time ever
Yes.
on the show tonight, because I actually thought that because she's been getting terrible grief for being a transphobe and all the rest of it.
Well, she's, suffered with endometriosis herself. She's actually written a lot about her fertility struggles, because women who suffer from it do suffer terribly with trying to conceive. So, she has a personal perspective on this.
Right.
They always do this. If it's J.K. Rowling, it's Helen Joyce, whoever it is, if it's a woman who says these things, she'll get leapt on by the trans activists. And, it silences a lot of women. It's such a problem.
Absolutely right. We'll get back onto the subject of school strikes and the whole kind of issue of marching, which is going to be going on this weekend. Stephen, I just wanted to congratulate you on your great piece that you managed to procure from some Home Office guy or woman or non-binary person, knowing what they're like at the Home Office. And if you guys saw it, but Telegraph had this great piece about how nothing really gets done in the Home Office, which has got anything to do with helping anybody in the government to get immigration numbers down.
It's incredibly worrying. So, as you mentioned, we commissioned a piece from an anonymous civil servant who was writing from the Home Office, describing their perspective within that department in terms of how people deal with immigration.
Right.
And they were saying that their colleagues do not want to control Britain's borders. They see it as their role to be a resistance against the current government.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? Civil service resisting the government.
It's anti-democratic. It's unacceptable.
Right.
And James Cleverly, he must do everything in his power to investigate the allegations that were raised in that Telegraph piece. I think he's got a real bit of work on his hands in order to get the department under control. Yeah,
and one of the questions when we talk about Keir Starmer is that what would Keir Starmer do in terms of the Home Office, in terms of the policy that the Labour Party would have? Nobody seems to know, because there's nobody in Labour really saying anything.
Well, he said that he would rather tackle the trafficking gangs directly, but the National Crime Agency said that's not totally feasible. You need legal disincentives as well, because the way that the criminal gangs operate, they're quite disparate and fragmented, so it would actually be very difficult to just focus on that. You need other methods as well. But he doesn't like the Rwanda scheme, Keir Starmer, but he hasn't said what he would do in terms of the legality, or what he would try and do to disincentivise people from coming in the first place.
Yeah. Megan, are you surprised that the Home Office is so kind of anti-government? Presumably it would also be anti-Labour if they got in, because if they wanted to do the same thing.
well, yeah, that's the thing with the civil service. You're never going to have them supporting the one party in government at the time. I'm not necessarily surprised by what I read. It's a problem across government that party departments just kind of stagnate. If you look at the chronic procurement problems in the MOD, with those enormous amounts of money that they're overspending on things that just don't work. So no, it didn't necessarily surprise me at all.
And when the piece ran, Stephen, you were able to find out from inside the Home Office that the bosses, if you like, the mandarins, I suppose, were telling the employees to completely ignore any criticism, that they're doing a great job and, have another 5 days off and go and do something for Black History Month.
Well, it's a speciality of mine doing stories about the Home Office.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that the bosses in the Home Office, whenever I do a story, they get extremely upset about everything that I'm publishing.
Right.
Do
they complain to the paper?
They complain to me and they ring me up and they shout at me. But they also they have these internal emails and they say, don't look at this as a terrible criticism.
Right.
They do little meetings and they talk about my stories and they say, oh, you must ignore this as terrible. How dare the Telegraph go after us? We must all unite and we must double down on our diversity agenda.
They presumably must think you're the evil personified wing, sort of publicity wing of the Tory evil government.
Well, I'm sure that they do, but I'm merely holding them to account for their actions. And
Yeah.
I think that they have a democratic duty to deliver on the government's priorities on immigration, which is to control our borders, and they're not doing that.
Yeah.
And they really go without scrutiny as well. We've got no idea what they're doing. I thought the Telegraph has actually really broken some good stories, even though they're quite frightening stories, like the former Hamas operative who was given citizenship here. And you just think, who did that? I mean, who actually okayed this? How did this happen?
I know.
And these things have been going on and no one has any idea about them.
And we have story after story after story of people who have come into the country, managed to get asylum here by false pretences. We've got one up in Bolton today, a Nigerian guy, who said he couldn't go back to Nigeria because he was gay. It turns out since he's been here, he was granted asylum. He's had 3 kids with 3 different women. His lawyer now says he can't go back to Nigeria because he's got parental responsibilities. But he's not gay anymore, he's bisexual, apparently. And you just go, come on, guys, I mean, this is not tough. You don't have to be a really, really horrible inquisitor to actually get the truth out of people who are telling lies.
This is the crucial point, and this is something that was mentioned in the Home Office piece,
Yeah.
is that everyone in the Home Office understands that there are huge abuses to our asylum system. But when you suggest to tighten the rules, they say that, no, this would be terribly evil and awful, and we can't do anything about it.
Oh, no.
Or they'll allude to international law. They'll say, if you want to control our borders, for example, with the Rwanda scheme, actually, no, it's not possible because of international law. So every single scheme that's proposed is simply shut down or ignored.
Right. Exactly right. We might have some news from the Telegraph actually coming up very shortly on development on Suella Braverman writing a piece. But let's just talk a little bit about Osama bin Laden, the letter from America, or letter to America. I mean, you guys are all younger than me. I mean, almost everybody is these days. I remember 9/11 as if it was yesterday. My sister was in New York at the time. I was in London. And it was just such a horrendous thing. And the fact that Osama bin Laden's name has now kind of resurrected thanks to TikTok and is kind of feeding into this social justice movement for young people. You guys are all sensible enough not to obviously fall for it. But are you surprised at what's going on?
It was quite shocking. I mean, for me, it was 2 things. I thought, one, this is the role of social media. People are just in these deep, deep echo chambers.
Yeah, like silos.
Yes. And then 2, I thought, yes, this social justice ideology, like you said, it's totally poisonous. I mean, they're viewing someone as sadistic and demented as Osama bin Laden as some sort of person fighting against the great oppressor.
Yeah.
I mean, they just don't have a clear view of him and what motivated him and why he did what he did.
Right.
But also, I mean, to read that letter and not come away a bit horrified is also quite frightening. You just wonder what sort of ideas that they're imbibing and how steeped in anti-Semitism
and
they
what
are.
else they're being taught in school, Megan, as well, because obviously they're being prepared for this kind of anti-Western propaganda, aren't they?
I think it's hard to picture an age group where 9/11 isn't a massive force in their life. Like, it's my first political memory and it's shaped pretty much every day of our existence since then. But I think the most alarming thing about it is that with all the information that's out there, she seemed to not know, the one we were talking about in the green room, seemed to not know an awful lot about his ideology and how inhumane it is and how it's been something we've been trying to disperse for a long time.
Right.
So, yeah, the point about schools is really interesting because how's this not come up, especially in America?
Well, we see this, don't we, in this country where we've seen from the various marches that have been going on for the last 5-6 weeks or so, whenever journalists go out and ask people who are on the march what they know about Hamas or what they know about October the 7th, it's amazing how little they know.
Yeah.
That they don't seem to understand that they're in danger of supporting a very, very bloodthirsty organisation.
I think there's a real ignorance, and I think this is also to do with people's connections to both their country and their history. So I think young people today are not patriotic. I don't think they have any connections to the past. I think they despise the West, as you say. And they see that Osama bin Laden, for example, they don't understand. I don't think they understand what 9/11 is, what 9/11 was, how he was involved in that. I think there's just a complete. I hope that it's in ignorance and they don't actually understand what actually happened. And I think that it's part of a general sort of attack on our culture and on our history. And as you say, it's interesting that 9/11 is finally sort of seeping out of people's minds and memories in the same way that the Second World War is also starting to sort of fade.
Well,
from
I
our
found
memory.
it quite interesting over Armistice weekend because, you know, you didn't see very many young people wearing poppies. You know, I'm not a poppy fundamentalist. I don't think you have to wear a poppy. I think you do what you like. You know, wear a white one if you want, don't wear one. But, you know, I noticed for the first time this year, a lot fewer poppies actually being worn.
Yeah, I think as a general point, that's certainly true. Over Armistice weekend, it's something I noticed more generally. I remember growing up, there was a lot of pressure to wear a poppy. It was kind of instilled in you.
Right.
Of course, it's great when people support the Royal British Legion, but I think it's something that spans generations now. I don't know why it's kind of declined, but it's less of a young person's problem, I think.
Well, tomorrow, don't worry, there'll be the Free Palestine school strike. I don't know whether this has been inspired by the likes of Greta Thunberg, but there's a couple of press releases that I've seen from schools from as far away as Bristol, Manchester, Glasgow, Essex. They're all going on strike tomorrow at 10 a.m. And presumably with the OK of the teachers and the local councils, they're going to march around their local neighbourhoods instead of being at school. So they're not going to learn much.
Teachers letting them out of school.
No, most of the teachers are already on the marches at the weekends, aren't they?
There was also, I think, a school in Bristol that took really tiny kids out and gave them such an imbalanced view of the whole thing. And, you know, it's true. I think a lot of it is ignorance. I mean, I remember when the marches people first started marching, and I was like, hang on a minute, you're timing. Like, this terrible thing has happened. Why are you doing this? And then I realised, actually, they don't really even know October 7th happened, or they don't think it happened. It is just ignorance.
Some of them don't believe that it happened, which is another, you know, conspiracy theory mad thing that's going on. But we'll come back to that because